the absolute most important thing. I don't care about the numbers. If you feel like you cannot trust your general partners in an investment, walk away.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right, welcome back, Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast listeners. I appreciate you joining us again today. I have an amazing guest with me today, Mr. Anthony Walker from Cornerstone Commercial Investments. Anthony is an expert in the multifamily space, both on the management side, acquisition, and the capital raising for those opportunities. Anthony, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Very grateful to be here today and give some knowledge to your audience.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. And as I was joking with Anthony before we got started, I feel like I've known him for a long time, but we've never actually personally met. Why is that the case? Because Anthony, like myself, we both like to post a lot of content on social media. And so the LinkedIn algorithm gods have connected us together. And I continually see a lot of the great content that he's putting out there on that platform. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. I just want to provide as much knowledge to people thinking about syndicating, raising capital, and people looking at investing in syndications. I think LinkedIn's one of the best platforms to work with, like-minded individuals and provide value.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So why don't you tell our listening audience a little bit more about kind of your real estate investing journey and what you're currently focused on?
Yeah, totally. So, I started like many, middle-class family. My parents aren't entrepreneurs. They own their own house, and that's about all the real estate that they own. And I always had kind of a niche for wanting to do development. I just thought development from a young age was awesome. It looked like a lot of fun. I liked the idea of designing projects, but I had no idea what that entailed. And so I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so my first goal in everything has been financial freedom. How can I become financially free as quickly as possible? And real estate is, in my opinion, the best avenue to do that. It's the best way to cash flow on a monthly basis, to get tax-free wealth, and to build generational wealth. So I started focusing on consuming as much knowledge as I possibly could from podcasts, from other books outside of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I, would get coffee with people who are around real estate, who knew real estate, who I, admired to be like. And I just learned. I learned for years and years. I went to college and got a degree in finance. Didn't learn anything from my degree, but my degree gave me a lot of time to walk to class and go to the gym and listen to podcasts about real estate. And so that's what I did. I learned real estate. And but actually, I took a veer in college and thought, you know what? I'm going to start a tech company. I'm going to sell that tech company, and that's how I'm going to invest in real estate. Everyone kind of has their own journey, how they want to build their wealth, right? And that was mine. And so I graduated college, paid for all my college actually flipping cars. My parents, said, if you want anything in life, you have to pay for it. And so learned that from a young age. And graduated college and got my first job, $36,000 a year. And I realized that this was not the path that I wanted. I wanted to learn how to start a business. So I thought I'd go work for a business. And so I quit my first 9-to-5 job with about $20,000 saved up and zero idea what I was going to do. I listened to Brandon Turner talk a lot about the BRRRR method, wholesaling, and I thought that was pretty cool. And so I went and rented a bedroom for $350 a month, and I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad again on the couch. And I thought, you know what, I got to figure out what I want to do. And I, didn't have a lot of mentors in my life. My family, like I mentioned, isn't, entrepreneur, so I really had to find my own way. And I found a guy, and he had bought about 220 single-family homes from tax auctions. And so that was my first taste into real estate. I worked for him for free at first, And then I eventually got paid $10 an hour from him and did everything on paper, no technology, man in his 70s, but did incredible. He bought these houses and he never made more than $70,000 a year as a W-2 employee. And now in retirement was living off $1.2 million a year, had a beautiful house on the lake, lived the dream life. And so did that for a few months until I realized what a real estate agent did. And I got my real estate license and did well there. In my first year, I was a top producer. I was, rookie of the year, and I hustled. There's no, you hear that there's smart work and there's hard work. I just was hard work. I was door knocking, cold calling, sending mailers, running Facebook ads, doing everything I possibly could, and it worked. It was kind of guerrilla tactics. And I hustled, and I made good money my first year, saved it all, still lived cheaply. Second year, met my now business partner. We kind of formed a real estate team, sold more real estate, did, 40 million, I think that year, just about 40 million in my second year with my business partner, saved the money, lived cheaply, invested into real estate. And that's when we really started taking off. So third year, sold real estate and launched, really went into Cornerstone, which now I'm a third business partners, myself, John, and John own Cornerstone. And use the money from sales to significantly scale that company, hire our first employees, have some capital to get more projects going. And then, that's kind of what's got me to where I am today. So I'm, as mentioned, the third business owner in Cornerstone. I'm the chief investment officer. I'm the one in charge of all the marketing as well, branding, building personal brand. We've raised just under $52 million in equity over the last bit of time, and have about 120 million under management with another 1,000, I'd say 500 doors we own the land or do own the land to build more projects, and about 500 more doors that we have in the pipeline that we are negotiating actively on to scale our development and value add projects.
Anthony, that's quite the track record, and I'm going to dive a little bit more into some of the things that you talked about. But I did, for the listening audience, want to highlight some things that Anthony talked about that is very similar to my own track record, and perhaps maybe many that listen in regularly. And that is, he talked about this purple book, otherwise known as Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He talked about, kind of becoming aware that financial freedom or time freedom is something that we can attain earlier than, busting it for 50 years in a W-2 job. He talked a lot about education. I think that's incredibly instrumental. When I first got the itch or the bug to get into multifamily real estate investing, it was all about reading books after book after book, right, and really listening to podcasts. The information out there, and I remind my listening audience of this often, the information is already out there. You don't have to spend $50,000 on a master class. You don't even really need to show up to a conference or a big convention and spend a bunch of money listening to keynote speakers, although I think the networking side of those events is incredibly impactful. But the information is out there for us. And the last thing that you talked about was the grinding side of it, right? You're a grinder, and I can obviously tell based upon your kind of short time, in this business that hustle, that daily grind, and that daily kind of focusing on, becoming a better version of yourself and really attaining, the goals that you set out to attain. It didn't come easy, I'm sure.
No, not at all. And, there is a time in your life where you get to leverage your time and you get to hire employees and you get to work smarter, not as hard. You get to be more focused, I would say. It's not that you're working less hard or, less hours. I worked probably the same amount of hours that I did when I first started. It's just more focused. I know what to focus on now. I know where my core abilities are. But when you're first starting, like I said, earlier, it's like guerrilla tactics. You're putting everything out there. You're working on everything you possibly can because you're figuring out where your niche is and where you fit in the marketplace, where your core fundamental skills are. And that just takes repetition after repetition to understand, and it takes a long time. And I'm a firm believer you have time in the industry and you have experience. And a lot of people get the two confused. A lot of people think that, this guy's been in the industry for 20 years, but he's bought, 100 doors. Okay, great. Now, is he more experienced than the guy who's been in it for 5 years that's bought 10,000 doors or even 1,000 doors, who's, done the reps. And that's what it's about. It's not about time, it's about reps. And the harder you work, the more hours you work, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, give you more reps. And that's what gets you the experience to know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. You get out of it what you put into it. That's
Right.
that's for sure. So what markets are at Cornerstone? What markets are you guys focusing on? I'm pretty confident in saying that the asset class is primarily multifamily, but what particular markets do you focus in on, and what are you good at?
Right. So we do, Class B, multifamily, B plus, workforce housing, nothing subsidized, nothing, ultra luxury. We like that middle ground. That's the bread and butter. I'm sure you hear that a lot. So it's hardly a competitive advantage these days. But what is a competitive advantage for us is our markets. So we aren't building in Phoenix and in Arizona and these big primary markets. We're building in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Sandpoint, Idaho, Missoula, Kalispell, Bozeman. So all over Idaho, Montana, we're looking at projects down in Boise, and Central Oregon, that Bend area. And what they all have in common is they're all very quickly growing tertiary markets. Coeur d'Alene was the number one fastest growing market in 2020. And so we like these markets because they have more demand than they have supply, certainly. They have job growth, which are all great indicators, but they're also all incredibly hard to find assets in and develop assets in. So if you come to Coeur d'Alene, you want to buy multifamily, go ahead and go try, because every Californian wants to buy multifamily here as well. And so there's very little supply, and developing, there's a sentiment in these markets where they don't want to grow. So it makes developing very, very difficult and a longer process. But when you get it done, it's highly profitable and it gives good returns to our investors. And it's kind of a needle in the haystack. And so that's kind of why we focus on these markets.
Interesting. So I know many investors like to focus on the sexy markets like Phoenix and Dallas and Tampa,
Right.
the Carolinas. I know I've heard a lot of speak about Columbus, Ohio, kind of being the next Austin, Texas. So talk us through, why invest in, I'm going to call it the Pacific Northwest, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Why invest in the tertiary markets of the Pacific Northwest, which traditionally were deemed boring markets?
Right. Number one, these markets are growing quickly. There's, the best quality of life in the world, arguably, in a lot of these markets. There's a reason that people are moving here in droves and want to be here. The quality of life just doesn't get better. B, there's, supply and demand. I mean, you can go to Arizona, Phoenix right now, find 40 acres, get it annexed in, and build 300 units. You want to do that here, you have to go through city council. You'll probably get disapproved. You do that for 3 years, you'll probably still get disapproved. Maybe the fourth year you get the project approved, and then now you're building it, which makes a severe supply constraint in our markets. So demand far outweighs supply, which, as you know, when that happens, when there's more, demand than supply, it pushes up those rents. Also, you can go buy in a city like Seattle the similar product for $350, $400 a door, where we can build it for $200 to $250 a door here, and it's getting close to those rents because the amount of demand we have. So the returns and the appreciation are just crazy. And the third reason is we aren't competing with massive institutions. So we don't have, BlackRock coming in here and wanting to buy all of our apartments up yet. I think that is coming. So we don't have to, compete at these, crazy low cap rates as much as you would in a primary market. And so that's, those are just some of the reasons we like them. And we get similar, if not better, returns than you would in a primary market.
Interesting. So, that there's a few different stages to every economic market cycle. People could argue that maybe we're in a recession right now, maybe we're not. But, I understand the market cycles to be, really recession, recovery, expansion, and hyper supply, right? So do you agree with this statement? And the statement is there are opportunities in all stages of the market cycle to invest.
Absolutely. I mean, I would have loved to buy some assets at the top of the market in 2021 and lock in 2%, 2.5% fixed rates because the cash flow would be incredibly high. I mean, we really optimize toward high cash flow. But there's also opportunity today. I mean, I think I read, I don't know if you follow Jay Parsons on LinkedIn, great multifamily economist. I highly recommend everyone following. But but he was talking like 60 to almost 70% of new construction developments are on hold right now due to the inability of getting construction financing. So right now we're having projects come to completion, but no, very little new projects coming to life. So it's a great time to build right now because in 25, 26, 27, again, in our markets, supply constraint, going to jack up prices, going to get better returns. And also right now we're seeing, construction costs, flatline, more predictable, potentially come down in some markets. So it's a great time to build because, 2021, 22, it was, record high construction costs. So of course there's opportunity in every single market cycle. You just have to know what you're looking for and know where to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this historic rise in interest rates and kind of the word recession being talked about a lot lately, and the topsy-turviness of Wall Street, it seems every day, would you say that private investor capital has gotten scared in the last 12 months?
Absolutely. It's sitting on the sideline. And so, one thing you can never do is time the market. I think they did a study. If you had timed the market perfectly, you would have made like a very little, I think it was like $100,000 investment over a certain amount of time. You would have made like a few $1,000s more than if you timed the market perfectly. So, but absolutely, the market is scared right now. There's money sitting in treasuries. And what they're doing is they're missing out on opportunity costs. Look at the difference between if you had invested at the bottom of the 2008 recession when everyone was scared to, if you had sold that in 2020, you would have made a crazy good return. But a lot of people just follow the masses. They follow what the news says. So, there's going to be more money coming into the market when the market looks better, and they're going to be buying the assets at a significantly more price than they are today. And so, it's a daily struggle, I would say, but it is also where the market's at.
Would you say that raising private investor capital at Cornerstone is your greatest headwind?
I would say that, we have the opportunity where people in our markets understand how good our markets are. So we have a lot of locals who invest in our projects, people that I've gotten coffee with, people, over 80% of our capital has been word of mouth raised. So, we get a friend to invest, they tell their friends and family how good of a job that we have done, and they invest in the projects. That's how we've snowballed Cornerstone. So we do have, when we launch something in a market, a lot of times it is received really well. And, dentists, lawyers, all those people are still getting their paychecks. So they're investing in our deals. But as we're scaling our company, we have goals of raising, $50 million, let's say over the next 12 to 18 months, which we do. So we want to scale our investor pool toward, California, Texas investors, national investors. It is more difficult. Absolutely. So that's our biggest headwind is getting outside capital into our markets.
Right. Creating awareness across the country versus just your capital coming from local people that actually live, work and breathe in the communities in which you have properties located.
Bingo.
Yeah. Is Cornerstone a vertically integrated operator, or do you have third-party property management?
We do not. So we have third-party property management. We have a core belief that we will not bring anything internal until we can 100% tell our investors that we can do it better. A lot of companies will start with property management in-house because they see the money that it can make, but they'll do a poor job managing it because they can't do better than the property managers. And that's just the reality of it. They're looking at making money and lining their own pockets. I've seen it done time and time again, and I see a lot of them fail as well. And so we have chosen to focus on three core things. We are going to be the best asset managers in our markets. We will be the best developers in our markets possible, and we will raise capital at scale. And that is what Cornerstone is focused on. We will scale our company. We will build thousands of units, focusing on those core values. And then when we hit the amount of units where it makes sense, we can hire or purchase a property manager, and we can do it better than anyone else in our market. We will launch, let's say Cornerstone rentals or Cornerstone management.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you and the other two Johns personally invest their own capital into the opportunities that you're looking to raise private investor capital for?
Absolutely. None of the general partners have ever taken a salary. We've invested all of our money into our deals. So I have pretty much all my money invested into our own deals, and all the general partners live off the cash flow that our properties produce. So we're not taking, we're not taking salaries as mentioned. We're not, lining our pockets. We're investing right back in the deal. So we've invested our own capital, all three of us, into every single deal that we've ever syndicated.
What mistakes have you made that you've learned from?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of mistakes. I mean, there's daily mistakes, I would say, and that's why we're so successful, is because we never let them paralyze us. We always learn from them and build a better company. Um, Probably the biggest mistake we made was, in hindsight 2020, is we started a project and we broke ground at the beginning of 2020, um, and our general contractor on that project, the superintendent, got COVID and unfortunately passed away. And then mixed with COVID and all that stuff, it caused about a 6-month delay. And the biggest lesson that we learned out of that is we were trying to reduce costs and use a little bit smaller of a contractor, great gentleman, but just smaller, and didn't have backup, didn't have someone else who could take that project manager's place. And so it halted the project. And actually, our team had to step in and manage part of that project. And we had to bring on a different contractor on to finish that project, and we have a great relationship with them now. But the biggest lesson there is you get what you pay for. So if you use a smaller contractor, it could be a very worthwhile endeavor and you could save some money. But also if you use a big contractor, it might cost a bit more, but you get the project done quicker. If you have flaws, they fix it. They know what they're doing, and they get it to, they hit the timelines that they are setting out to. And that goes for all realms. If you use a bigger property manager, you get better systems and processes. If you use a bigger contractor, you get better systems and processes. You get the back end system. Architects, engineers, all these different things in developing in real estate. If you use the highly experienced, bigger firms, you typically get a better product, and you can save some money using smaller people, but it can also backfire immensely and cause you significantly more money. And in development and value add, every month that you're not rented up is money lost. You have to look at it that way. If that project's cash flowing, $1.2 million a year, $100,000 a month, and you're delayed, 3 months, that's $300,000 in potential revenue lost. And you have to look at it that way. And that's where the cost savings come from using a bigger, contractor or architect or property manager.
Anthony, I'd like to pivot away from talking about Cornerstone and instead focus on Cornerstone's investors. Okay. My next question for you is this, and that is, what advice do you have for the new investor?
Number one, you always have to trust and believe in the core values that the GP is presenting. So watch them on their webinars, watch them on any videos, and understand their core values, what they talk about, family, how they treat their family, all these different things, who they are as a person, and your gut feeling about the general partners, in my opinion, is the absolute most important thing. I don't care about the numbers. If you feel like you cannot trust your general partners in an investment, walk away. That would be my first thing, is deeply trust your general partner's core values. And also, the second point there is buy into their vision. What is the general partner's vision? What are they putting out there? What are the leadership team putting out in the world? And what is their vision? And can you get behind their vision? So that's the first thing, is underwriting and understanding the general partners. I'm not saying you do a background check on them. That's great. That can tell you a couple things, but who they are as a person, what their track record is so much more important. So that's the first thing I look at. The second thing I look at is their numbers and their true projections. Every syndicator out there is a conservative underwriting syndicator. Everything's conservative these days, so it's no longer a competitive advantage, right? So what are they actually predicting? Look at ask them what their numbers are. What is their assumed rent projections? Why, prove their rents. If they're going to say they're going to do a value add and increase rents $400 a month, talk to local property managers and see if those are actual true numbers. Because assumptions, statistics and assumptions are anything that you make them, right? You can make numbers look really good. You can say you're going to get a 20% IRR per year, but where does that number come from? And so highly vet the numbers and the assumptions that they use. And the third thing is read through the entire presentation. If it's a development or it's a value add, understand where the development is and understand, what they're going to do, what kind of product they're going to deliver to the market. And then most importantly, when you're looking at the presentation, is understand the location. Location, determines how high your rents are going to be pushed. It determines how high your appreciation is going to be pushed. It determines pretty much the amount of money, the return you're going to get on your investment is highly determined on that location.
Yeah, absolutely. Relative to location, that's the one thing you can't do in multifamily real estate is you can't decide to just
Right.
move the property from one market location to another, right? So you gave the audience a bit of a master class on evaluating, sponsors. You talked obviously about location. You talked about track record, the business plan, the vision, your gut. Do you trust the person, right?
Right.
Those types of things. But one thing that you really highlighted that I think is incredibly important, I encourage all investors, whether you're new or existing in the space, is challenging those assumptions. Challenging the rent growth assumptions, job growth, insurance costs, financing structure, absorption, exit cap, assumptions, all of those things, really matter. And it's really not that difficult for, the average investor to really challenge some of those assumptions, that are laid out by the sponsor in their pitch deck. So thank you for that.
Right. And if you have any questions on that, I'm sure you can reach out to either of us. We can provide a simple pro forma that you can use to underwrite syndications, just a simple plug in the rents and see what their assumptions are coming up. And if you change those percentage growth amount, if it's a 3% a year growth and 2% expense growth, which is very common, look at that and see if your numbers line up, because it's very important. And I've seen syndicators project numbers that are false. And also on that point, one thing that I cannot stand is when, they do marketing, they push a bunch of numbers and they're property level and not investor level. So they're saying, hey, look, this is going to be a 20% IRR. And then you break it down and actually the investor IRR is, 13 or 14%. So look at that as well. Just because the property is producing something doesn't mean that's what you're going to get in your pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so. So my next question for you is, how would you explain the tax benefits of real estate investing to a new investor who's never previously participated as a limited partner investor?
Great question there. And it's been such a sexy term the last 3 years, right? You're getting this bonus depreciation. You're going to get so much tax write-off that you are going to never pay taxes again in your life. That seems like what every syndicator's been pushing, but that's just unfortunately not the reality. So if you're a typical W-2 employee and you're working a job, which most people are, a lot of those tax benefits unfortunately aren't going to affect you in the ways that you think they are. I mean, you're going to have some benefits from them, but you're not going to get your whole W-2 income written off, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean tax benefits aren't powerful. So the most powerful thing that you can see in tax benefits, in my opinion, is you can build your real estate wealth as tax-free as possible. So a lot of times you can depreciate the asset. You can get a lot of your cash flow tax-free. You can get a lot of your appreciation tax-free, whether or not it's through depreciation you've taken from other assets you're investing in as well, or from a 1031 exchange. And so the other benefit of investing in real estate is if you invest in more than one property. So you have this property producing depreciation, this property, producing depreciation, and they can help you offset both of them. If one isn't depreciating as much as the other, and one's cash flowing too much, they can kind of offset each other. And so that's why it's important also to diversify between different assets and different properties. But that's the key right there is understanding that when you invest in real estate, you can build your real estate net worth as tax-free as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And as just a brief disclaimer to the audience, neither Anthony nor I are tax professionals. We're not certified public accountants, but we both have seen a tremendous amount of value in the tax depreciation or the depreciation of those real estate assets, and really what it means to the overall total amount of taxes that we're paying into Uncle Sam. So thank you for sharing that.
And one more point on that, actually, and I want to play as one of the probably the best strategies I can see as a investor, certainly a new investor, is we were talking earlier about people sitting on the sidelines with their money. They're saying, hey, the market isn't that great right now. I'm going to wait 2-3 years. Instead of looking at it that way, if you looked at it as, hey, I'm going to invest today into a syndication or a property that's going to refinance in 2 to 3 years when rates get a little bit better and you have a little bit of appreciation, and now you have one property producing, you refinance, which refinances are debt, so they're tax-free. Now you have another amount of money you can invest boom, now you have 2 properties and you get 2 properties snowballing. You do that 3, 4, 5 times and you are doing incredible. And it's called the snowball method is what I call it. And you just keep on snowballing that wealth up. You refinance, put into another property, refinance both those properties, put it into 4 properties, and it's keep on snowballing it. And that's where wealth is built.
You call it the snowballing effect, and I call it the seventh wonder of the world, and that is compounding. So,
right.
Well, good. So I know that you do a lot of stuff on social media, LinkedIn, and maybe some other platforms. Is that your primary way to attract new investors to Cornerstone, or are there other ways in which you're attracting investors? And do you have a specific investor avatar, that you generally are geared more towards?
Put an offer out there that is so good that investors feel stupid saying no to, right? That's the goal, is producing properties and putting opportunities in front of investors that they feel stupid saying no to, and then they want to refer their friends and family. So as mentioned, about 80% plus of our capital has been referrals. It's getting one investor in the door. They tell their friends and family. What we call it, you've read the book Raving Fans. All of our investors are raving fans. We produce good returns. We're properties that you otherwise couldn't afford to buy yourself, and they're in amazing locations, and you want your friends and family in there. You want your friends and family to build wealth alongside you. And so that's our primary way is referrals. We want everyone to refer more investors to us. So that's our biggest way. Yeah, that's our biggest way. Other avenues that I explore and actively raise capital from is LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a good source there. There's a lot of people out there. I just love providing value. So that's probably my biggest focus on LinkedIn. I do think that there's going to be future value there as well for me. And then we do some paid marketing. So we do have a marketing company that runs ads on Instagram and Facebook, and that's a long-term play. That's getting, let's say we get 500 leads a month there. A lot of them will be not accredited. A lot of them will be accredited, but they won't convert for 6 months. They want to look at us. They want to look at the GPs. They want to watch the webinars. They want to build trust in us, and that takes time because they're not referred. They're not having a friend say, hey, look, invest with them. That trust is already built down now with their friend telling us about us. But those cold leads, they just take time. And that's kind of those are our 3 primary methods. And then with that, we're launching our own podcast as well. And we're, actively getting more active on other social media platforms.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, the easiest way to attract a new investor is by having an existing investor refer you. But that largely is going to be based upon their ability to trust you, in addition to the fact that eventually, you've got to be, not just talking the talk, but you got to walk the walk. You got to put your money where your mouth is, that kind of thing. And eventually investors want to start seeing, distributions as they were maybe, projected, in the pitch deck. They're going to want to potentially see the opportunity for some deals to go full cycle and so forth. So
the other thing I want to point out there too is sometimes raising capital takes work. I mean, I'm a big proponent of raising capital, as I say, in your backyard. I mean, I've door knocked, $3, $5, $10 million homes, given out flyers to people and raised capital that way as well, first starting. And I've done that this summer. I mean, there's investors that I want in my local communities, and I'm willing to go down there and door knock myself and people on our team to try to get those local investors. So that's what I say too, is like, if you don't have the money to pay for marketing and LinkedIn takes a long time to build up, go door knock. Go and door knock $5 million houses in the neighborhood you're trying to syndicate a property in and say, hey, look, I'm buying this property down the street from you. Are you interested in investing? Or however you want to pitch it. Find a good way to pitch it. I mean, that's where sales tactics come in, and raise capital in your backyard for a property that you're syndicating in your backyard.
That's the kind of testament to the type of grinder that we're talking to here with Anthony Walker. So yeah, absolutely. I have not heard of door knockers going around their communities raising capital, but certainly a potential path to deploy for sure. What are some educational resources that you would recommend to new investors to learn more about the benefits of passive real estate investing? Yeah,
I mean, I'm a big proponent. I mean, I listen to Bigger Pockets podcast until like episode 500. I think podcasting is amazing. I mean, I very rarely listen to music when I'm driving my car to work, when I'm at the gym, when I'm on a walk, anything that I can that I'm not working, I'm listening to podcasts personally. So I think that is just a phenomenal resource. There's so many good podcasts out there. Brandon Turner's got a new one. the Fun podcast, syndication podcast, this podcast, all of them, just consume them, find where your niche is, find who you like, who you resonate with, who you can buy into what their message is, and listen to it, consume it, understand it, and believe in it. And then the next way is, books. I think, books outside of just real estate, the 4-Hour Work Week, these books that show you the possibility of working less but achieving more, get you to buy in on passive income, because that's truly what passive income is. It's the ability to get your money leverage. When you invest into a syndication, outside of the real estate, you're leveraging your time. You're hiring property managers. You're hiring myself. You're hiring my team to work for you. Every single investment is leveraging your time. When you leverage your time, you make more money. And then the third method would be going out and reaching out to people. I've gotten coffee with probably the most successful people in my community and asked them about real estate investing and how much wealth that they built through it, and gotten a firsthand account of what real estate investing can do for them and what it can do for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So books, podcasts, mentorship, the information is all out there. And the majority of it is out there for free. But you brought up a good point in that word leverage. There's a lot of people with a lot of experience out there, and leveraging their experience and their time can be incredibly impactful. And then when it comes to the passive real estate side, you're really leveraging the experience and the track record and the knowledge of the sponsor who's ultimately doing the actual work, on the property, while you're largely sitting back and just looking for those monthly investor communications to roll in, and obviously the distributions that come along with those investments. So the next question is, and we've got a couple more here and then we'll wrap it up, but what are one or two ways maybe that you use your talents to give back?
Yeah, great question. So, number one, we're very community focused. I love the place that I live in. I want to, raise my children here, and I just absolutely love Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and northern Idaho and in Montana. And so we give back to our communities. We're donating money in different ways. At least once a month, my team goes and cooks meals for the Ronald McDonald House here locally. That's benefited my business partner's family individually, my family, and so we're a big proponent of that. Also, LinkedIn, a lot of stuff I post is free content. I want to give as much. I want to give all the value for free. And then third, I'm launching this podcast, and I want to give as much as I can through my own podcast. I'm going to interview some pretty incredible people and just give the knowledge. I think the true wealth in the world is knowledge passed on from generation to generation, and I feel like calling to truly to give back to people and provide more value so they can build wealth for their families, they can get closer to God, they can do all these beautiful things in life, and that truly comes through knowledge.
Have you identified a name for your podcast yet?
It is a life well lived, and the idea behind it will be, what can you do today to live a better life tomorrow? And that's kind of the idea behind it, is how do you live your best life? And living your best life starts today. And so I'm going to interview people. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to interview, some remarkable people that have lived a beautiful life. They've had beautiful family lives. They've built massive amounts of wealth, and what their definition of a life well lived is. All
right, audience, you heard it here first. Yeah, that sounds great. What is the next item on your bucket list that you'd like to check off?
Great question. I kind of look at this in multiple buckets, but for me personally, perspective, and perspective comes through traveling. So one of my goals is with Cornerstone and with what I do is I want to get to a point where I'm free in all aspects, right? And I'm still personally working toward all my freedoms in life as well. I'm with our investors. I'm investing for more freedom to, live a beautiful life. So, but one of the things that I'm, personally calling toward is a lot more travel, get more perspective, look how people live around the world, and truly gain a worldwide perspective and bring that into our investor community and allow them to live a beautiful life that I know that they can live.
Anthony, I've really appreciated the value that you've provided the listening audience with today. I appreciate your time as well. What are a couple of ways that our audience can connect with you to learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. On Instagram, Anthony Walker 18. And then our website is www.cornerstonecommercialinvestments.com. So any three of those, you can find my contact, and you can always reach out to me to ask any questions.
Freedom Point podcast listeners, thank you again for jumping into another episode of the Freedom Point. Look forward to talking with you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.